Hi. So today I'm going to be doing a presentation about coral reefs. This will entail where they're found, how they're formed, the types of organisms that are found in these ecosystems, and many more. So let's get into it. Now, first of all, how are coral reefs formed? This is actually a very complex and interesting process, so I'll show you how. Now, before coral reefs actually become coral reefs, they usually start out as volcanic islands. Then over the course of thousands of years, these volcanic islands eventually become inactive, and once that happens, they start to sink into the ocean floor. This first stage of reef growth is what's commonly known as a fringing reef. So as you can see in this diagram, the island hasn't quite sunk yet, but this is when reefs start to cluster and form together right below the shore of the island. So here are some examples. The reefs in these pictures exhibit many common characteristics of fringing reefs. They are very shallow and close to the shoreline. Also, as you will see in the last diagram, there is often a small lagoon between the edge of the reef and the start of the shoreline. The next type of reef formation is called a barrier reef. These don't differ too much from fringing reefs. However, the main difference being is that the island is further sunk and the lagoon that separates the edge of the reef between the start of the shoreline is also a lot wider. So here we have some barrier reefs. As noted, the lagoon separating the two is very vast, and the island is either partially submerged or very far away from the edge of the reef. The third and final type of reef formation is called an atoll. These types of reefs are characterized by their ring shape. Since the island is completely submerged at this point, the only thing that remains is the coral reef that once surrounded the island and now encloses an open lagoon in the middle. So here we have some nice shots of a couple of atolls. Notice the thin outer ring and the large open lagoon in the middle. Finally, I decided to include a few more diagrams showcasing exactly how the transition of a fringing reef to an atoll takes place. This whole entire process can take upwards of 10,000 years, and interestingly enough, Charles Darwin was the first person to propose the hypothesis of atoll formation by the sinking of a volcanic island. So now that we've discussed how coral reefs are made, let's talk about how the actual coral structures are produced. Corals are formed by tiny coral polyps. These small organisms are typically a few centimeters in length, and they feed by using their tentacles to immobilize their prey by releasing toxic venom. But anyway, these polyps secrete calcium carbonate, which forms the hard exoskeleton that we come to know as a coral structure. Then, over the course of thousands of years, billions and billions of polyps eventually secrete enough calcium carbonate to form their exoskeletons, and then eventually they can come together to form a large, complex, interconnected framework of corals. Now, where on Earth are coral reefs located? Coral reefs are mainly found near the equator, usually between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. Because coral reefs thrive in warm tropical waters and ecosystems, their optimal temperature is about 26 or 27 degrees Celsius. And because of their need for warmth and sunlight, coral reefs don't usually form at depths below 160 feet, because it is usually too cold and dark down there. So here's a map of where all of the world's coral reef ecosystems are located. So as we can see here, these are areas optimal for coral growth and colony formation. This area is right between the Tropic of Cancer, which is here, and the Tropic of Capricorn, which is here. Now these are actual locations of coral reefs worldwide. And Southeast Asia, or the Indo-Pacific region specifically, is heavily concentrated with coral reefs. This area alone accounts for 92% of all reefs on Earth. However, there are many reefs also found within the Caribbean, the Red Sea, and the Persian Gulf as well. Now you may think that after looking at that picture, that coral reefs would take up a substantial amount of Earth's oceans, but actually, they only account for 0.1% of Earth's total ocean surface area. However, don't let that number fool you. While they do only take up 0.1% of Earth's ocean surface area, coral reef ecosystems provide a home and habitat to 25% of all living marine organisms on Earth. Considering that 25% of all marine species live in coral reef ecosystems, it's no surprise that they are some of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. Speaking of biodiversity, let's talk about some of the wildlife that inhabit coral reefs besides the corals. While this animal isn't exclusive to this ecosystem and is actually found all over the world, sea turtles have certainly made coral reefs a place to call home. These reptiles are certainly remarkable creatures, but they are endangered, however. But many steps are being taken to conserve them, such as monitoring and protecting their nesting sites. While they do breathe air, they can actually hold their breath for up to 5 hours. And during this time, up to 9 minutes can pass between each heartbeat for the sake of conserving oxygen. Dugongs are another fascinating animal as well. They are peaceful and quite large as well. They are actually related to elephants, which is very interesting. They are herbivores, but however, in the past couple decades, extensive habitat loss, hunting, and pollution have greatly diminished their numbers, and it is feared that they may soon become extinct. Now, unfortunately, if I were to try to name all of the species and different types of organisms that live in coral reefs, I would be here for way longer than I want to. But to close it off, I'm going to talk about how we interact with coral reefs and how our actions affect not only the ecosystem, but the animals that live there. Now, there are several major reasons contributing to the habitat loss and destruction of coral reefs. The first one being pollution, which is not really a surprise. Sewage, urban and industrial waste, and other harmful chemicals are constantly being dumped into these ecosystems. The second one being overfishing. Now, what overfishing does is it really messes with the natural food chain of an ecosystem. Number 3, global warming. Now, as I stated earlier, corals like to have an optimal, ideal temperature at which they survive. And if the global temperature rises, this could mean extinction for several species of coral. Nevertheless, we are humans, and we are responsible for all this. Within the next coming decades, we're going to face a lot of problems dealing with not only coral reefs, but ecosystems all around the world. And it's up to us to make positive decisions and changes that will lead to a better world in the long run.